The alien royal stood tall, her eyes glowing with an icy confidence. She looked down at the human before her, a mere earthling who dared to challenge her. "We don't kiss," she said, her voice laced with mockery, a smile curling at the corners of her lips. To her, it was nothing more than a game, a way to show her power. The human, though, did not flinch. He looked into her eyes with calmness, his posture unshaken, his heart raced. But he knew this moment was important. This wasn't just about proving a point. No, this was something more, a chance to show her that there was more to him than she could ever imagine. He stepped closer, not with arrogance, but with purpose. "You might change your mind," he replied softly, his voice low and steady. There was no fear in his words, only certainty. His confidence wasn't born from arrogance, but from understanding the truth. He had studied her kind, understood the barriers she built around herself. She was cold, distant, and untouchable, but even the hardest walls could crumble with the right touch. The alien royal, for the first time, felt a stir of confusion. She had never encountered anyone like him. Most earthlings trembled in her presence. They bowed. They begged. They were weak in comparison. But this human stood before her without fear, without hesitation. What made him so different? She couldn't help but laugh, her tone both amused and scornful. "You think your words can change me? You, a simple human," she sneered, stepping back as if to distance herself from his presence. "You do not understand your place." The human didn't respond to her insult. Instead, he took another step forward, unwavering. "I understand more than you think," he said, his voice a bit softer now, but still filled with a quiet strength. The alien royal couldn't deny the pull she felt. There was something about him, something in his eyes, in his calm, that made her pause. She had ruled for centuries, commanding armies, making decisions that shaped the fate of entire worlds. She had never been this unsettled before, and yet, here he was, a human, making her question everything she thought she knew about power and control. She looked away, unwilling to acknowledge the strange stirrings inside her. "You should leave," she said sharply, trying to regain her composure. But her voice lacked the usual authority. There was a crack in it, a vulnerability she didn't want to show. The human didn't leave. He stood his ground, his eyes still locked on hers. "I'm not going anywhere. Not until you understand that you don't have to be alone," he said quietly for a moment. The alien royal stood there, completely still. She looked at the human before her, her mind racing with questions. Emotions she hadn't felt in centuries bubbling to the surface. She had always been in control, always, but now, with him standing there, something inside her wavered. "I don't need anyone," she finally replied, though there was a doubt in her voice. The human smiled gently, his gaze softening. "Maybe you don't, but I'm not just anyone. And you're not just anyone either." The alien royal stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. This human was more than she had ever expected. And somehow, she couldn't help but wonder, what if he was right? She walked away, but the words from the human lingered in her mind like an echo she couldn't shake. "You're not just anyone." He had said it so simply, yet the impact was undeniable. She had ruled for centuries, and no one had ever dared to speak to her in such a way. She had always been in control, the one who gave orders, the one who commanded attention. But here was a human, a mere earthling, making her feel unsure. The alien royal's steps faltered as she reached the grand balcony, overlooking the sprawling city below. Her gaze swept across the alien landscape, but her mind was far from the view. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the human with the calm eyes, the steady voice, the quiet strength. He had something she couldn't place, something that had stirred feelings in her that she thought had long since died. She was a ruler, and emotions had no place in her world. But somehow, in his presence, those walls began to crumble. She clenched her fists at her sides, trying to push away the thoughts. She needed to stay focused. She was a leader, not some love-struck fool. The heart was a weakness, something that only served to distract. She had learned long ago that feelings only made one vulnerable, something she could not afford. But as she turned to leave the balcony, she caught sight of him again, standing in the shadows below, waiting. His figure was barely visible, but she could feel his presence as if it were a tangible thing. He wasn't just here to play a game. There was a sincerity in him that she couldn't ignore, and that, more than anything, terrified her. The alien royal didn't know why she found herself walking toward him, her steps almost automatic. There was something about the human that pulled her in, something that she couldn't explain. She knew she should turn away, walk back to the safety of her throne and her cold, controlled world. But the closer she got, the harder it became to resist the pull. The human didn't say a word when she stood before him. He simply waited, his eyes steady, unwavering. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no challenge, just understanding. And for some reason, that was enough. It was as if he had seen something in her that no one else had ever noticed, something that made him want to be near her. The alien royal opened her mouth to speak, to demand why he was still there, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what she was feeling, or why it felt so wrong to be standing so close to him. He was nothing more than a human, weak, fragile, and beneath her in every way. And yet, his presence filled her with an unfamiliar warmth, a feeling that made her heart beat faster than it should have. "I'm not like the others," he said quietly, breaking the silence. His words weren't a declaration, they were simply the truth. And somehow, in that moment, she believed him. The alien royal didn't know what to say. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Instead, she just stared at him, her heart racing as her mind struggled to make sense of the overwhelming emotions she couldn't control. She had always been the one who held power, the one who controlled everything around her. But now, with him standing before her, she felt powerless in a way she had never imagined. The days that followed were filled with silence, but it was not the comfortable, reassuring silence that the alien royal was used to. It was a heavy quiet, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. She couldn't stop thinking about the human, about the way he had looked at her, the way his presence seemed to stir something deep within her, something she thought was long buried. She had tried to push him from her mind, as she always did with distractions. But every time she closed her eyes, his face lingered. And the more she thought about him, the more she realized that she was beginning to care in a way she had never allowed herself to. She was supposed to be above such things. Her duty, her responsibilities, her kingdom, all of them had always come first. And yet, now, she couldn't deny the pull he had on her. It wasn't just the kiss. No, it was something deeper than that. Something in the way he had spoken to her, the way he had seen through all her walls, her armor, her defenses. She had spent so long constructing herself into a figure of invulnerability, never allowing anyone to get close, never allowing anyone to matter. But here he was, this human, piercing through her carefully constructed world with a single look, a single word. The alien royal found herself walking to the courtyard, her heart beating faster with each step. The human was there again, just as he had been the other day. His presence was like a magnetic force pulling her closer. And despite her best efforts to remain distant, she couldn't stop herself from moving toward him. He didn't speak at first, and for a moment, neither did she. They just stood there, facing each other. The human's eyes were steady, as if he had been waiting for this moment, as if he knew she would come to him eventually. And perhaps, in some strange way, he had. The alien royal took a deep breath, her chest tight with uncertainty. She was about to say something, but the words felt foreign on her tongue. How could she even begin to explain what was happening? How could she even begin to understand it herself? "You've been thinking about me," the human said softly, breaking the silence. There was no arrogance in his voice, just an understanding that made her chest tighten even more. "I can tell." Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't used to people seeing her this way, not used to being seen for who she really was. But somehow, with him, it felt different. He wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't intimidated by her power. He didn't see her as a ruler, a figure to be respected and feared. He saw her as a person who had emotions, doubts, fears. The alien royal took a step back, her mind racing. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaky despite her attempts to keep it steady. The human didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, as if considering the question carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "I don't want anything from you. I just want you to stop pretending." Her eyes widened. "Pretending?" she echoed, confused. He nodded. "Pretending that you don't care." pretending that you don't feel anything when you're around me. You're not as invincible as you think you are." The alien royal's breath caught in her throat. The words cut deeper than she expected. She had spent so long building up this fortress around her, so long convincing herself that she was above everyone else, that she could never let anyone in. But here he was, exposing her vulnerability in the most painful, most truthful way. "I'm not like the others," he said again, as if to remind her. "And I think you're starting to see that." Her heart raced. Was he right? Was she starting to see something different in him? Or was she simply losing her grip on everything she had ever known? For the first time in a long while, the alien royal felt the ground beneath her feet shift. She didn't know where this was going, but in that moment, she realized that she didn't need to. The human had shown her that there was more to life than control, than duty, than walls. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop fighting the change. The alien royal sat in the quiet of her chambers, her mind a swirl of confusion and curiosity. She had tried to shut out everything that had happened, tried to convince herself that the human was nothing more than a passing distraction, a fleeting moment of weakness. But the more she tried to push him away, the more his presence crept into her thoughts, into the very core of her being. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to feeling vulnerable, to being unsettled by someone else's gaze, someone else's touch. She had always been the one in control, the one who dictated the terms, the one who determined the path. But with him, it was different. Every interaction with him left her feeling exposed, raw, as if her armor had been pierced in ways she had never allowed before. That night, she couldn't sleep. The weight of her thoughts pressed down on her, and no matter how hard she tried to push them aside, they lingered. She found herself walking to the balcony once again, the cool night air brushing against her skin. Below, the city stretched out before her, a vast sea of lights and movement. It was a beautiful sight, but it felt distant, like she was watching it from another world, a world that no longer felt like her own. She hadn't meant to seek him out, but before she knew it, she was standing in the courtyard again, her eyes scanning the shadows for the familiar figure. There he was, standing just beyond the reach of the light, his gaze fixed on her as if he had been waiting. His calm demeanor, his quiet strength, everything about him was a stark contrast to the chaotic emotions she was trying to suppress. He didn't say a word at first. He didn't need to. She could feel the pull between them, a silent understanding that hung in the air like an unspoken promise. She took a step closer, her heart beating faster than she expected. Every part of her wanted to turn away, to retreat back into the fortress she had so carefully built around herself. But something inside her refused to allow that. "You're here again," the human said softly, his voice like a gentle breeze. "I didn't think you'd come." She couldn't find the words to respond at first. How could she explain the storm raging inside her? How could she explain the way he had gotten under her skin? The way he made her question everything she had ever known about herself, about her world? "I didn't come here for you," she said finally, her voice shaky but defiant. "I came here because I had to." His eyes softened, as if he understood. "You don't have to explain yourself," he said gently. "I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I want to understand you." For a moment, the alien royal was silent. Her thoughts swirled, tangled in knots. No one had ever wanted to understand her, not in the way he did. People feared her, respected her, but they didn't see her. They didn't see the loneliness that she had carried for so long, the isolation that came with being a ruler, a leader who had to make impossible choices every day. "I've never been understood," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not like this." The human stepped closer, his presence comforting yet unfamiliar. "You're not alone," he said simply. "I'm here, and I see you. All of you." The alien royal's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. A tiny spark, like a flame in the dark, igniting within her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, something that made her feel, truly feel. For the first time in ages, she closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. The walls she had built so carefully around herself, the walls that had kept her safe, began to crack. The alien royal wasn't sure what this meant, what this connection with the human could become. But in that moment, as they stood in the quiet of the courtyard. She realized that she no longer had all the answers, and maybe that was okay. Because for the first time, she didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have it all figured out, and that, in itself, was freeing. The night had fallen deep, and the stars above were hidden by the thick clouds that swirled like ghosts in the sky. The alien royal stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the vast expanse outside. But her mind was far from the view. It had been days since that moment in the courtyard, days since the human's words had begun to etch themselves into her heart. She could no longer ignore the stirrings inside her, no longer deny the feelings that had started to bloom like forbidden flowers. She thought she had everything under control, but now she wasn't so sure. The walls she had spent centuries building, walls meant to protect her from feeling, from vulnerability, had begun to crumble, and the more she tried to keep them intact, the more they seemed to slip through her fingers. Tonight, as she stood alone in her chambers, the weight of her emotions pressed down on her chest. She had never been so uncertain, so exposed. The human had awakened something in her, something she had buried deep within herself, something she thought she had outgrown. And now, she was left to confront it. It wasn't just the kiss. It wasn't the way he had looked at her or spoken to her. It was the way he made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way no one had ever done before. He didn't fear her power, didn't stand in awe of her title. He saw beyond the crown, beyond the armor she wore every day, and for the first time, she realized that maybe that was exactly what she needed. Someone who could look past her status and see her as more than just a ruler. Someone who could see the person beneath all the walls. As if summoned by her thoughts, the human appeared before her once again, standing silently in the doorway. His presence was always calming, always steady, but tonight it felt different. The tension between them was thick, palpable, like something was about to shift. She couldn't avoid it anymore. She couldn't hide behind her duties or her responsibilities. Not with him standing there. "I didn't come to ask for anything," the human said, his voice soft but purposeful. "I came because I needed to show you something. Something I think you've forgotten." She looked at him, confusion furrowing her brow. "What do you mean?" Her voice was barely a whisper, almost afraid of the answer. He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've spent your entire life believing you can't be touched, believing you can't feel. But that's not true. You're not invincible, and you're not alone." The alien royal's breath caught in her throat, her heart hammering in her chest. He was right, of course. She had built this fortress around herself, this impenetrable wall of control, because she was afraid of being weak, afraid of being vulnerable. But he was offering her something she had never allowed herself to believe in, a chance to be more than just the ruler, a chance to feel. "You've been waiting for someone to break through, haven't you?" The human continued, his voice gentle but unwavering. "Not to control you, not to dominate you, but to stand beside you, to understand you, to show you that you don't have to carry this burden alone." The alien royal felt her chest tighten. The walls she had fought so hard to maintain began to crumble in the face of his words, and she felt something stirring deep inside her. It wasn't just hope. It was the possibility of something new, something she hadn't dared to dream of. Her slowly, she stepped forward, closing the space between them. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for him, the gesture unspoken but full of meaning. The human didn't pull away. Instead, he gently took her hand, his touch warm, steady, grounding her in a way no one else ever had. "I don't know what this means," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know where it will lead." The human smiled softly, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name: affection, understanding, perhaps even love. "It doesn't matter where it leads," he said quietly. "What matters is that you're not alone anymore, and neither am I in that moment." The alien royal realized something she had never allowed herself to understand. It wasn't weakness to need someone. It wasn't a flaw to feel. It was simply part of being human. And maybe, just maybe, that was what she needed all along. The days that followed felt different, almost as if the world had shifted on its axis. The alien royal walked through the halls of her palace, but her mind was far from the grand architecture, the endless corridors, and the armies that waited for her orders. Her thoughts, once consumed by duty and control, were now filled with him, the human who had awakened something inside her that she couldn't ignore. Every moment she spent with him felt like a revelation, as if she were discovering a side of herself she had long forgotten. He wasn't like the others. He didn't look at her with fear or reverence. He didn't bow or speak in awe. Instead, he treated her like a person, not a queen. And it was this simple, unspoken truth that made her question everything she thought she knew about power, about connection, and about love. She found herself stealing moments to think of him, to wonder what it would be like to step away from the throne and simply be with him. It was a dangerous thought, a reckless thought. She knew the consequences of such feelings. As a ruler, she couldn't afford weakness. But despite her best efforts to push the idea away, it clung to her like a shadow, always present, always just beneath the surface. One evening, after another long day of council meetings and military reports, the alien royal found herself once again in the quiet of the courtyard, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel the weight of the world pressing down on her. She felt lighter, freer. And then, as if drawn by an invisible force, she opened her eyes to see him standing before her. Just as he had so many times before, he didn't speak at first. He simply looked at her, his expression soft, his gaze filled with something she couldn't quite name. There was no urgency in his movements, no pressure. He was just there, as if waiting for her to decide what came next. The alien royal took a step toward him, her heart racing as she did. She wasn't sure what she was doing, but in that moment, it didn't matter. All the walls she had spent so long building, all the walls she had used to protect herself, were slowly crumbling away. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. When she reached him, he didn't hesitate. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. "You're not alone," he said softly, his voice a calm anchor in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The alien royal closed her eyes, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so long hiding, so long pretending she didn't need anyone. But in his arms, in his presence, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in centuries: hope. A spark, a glimmer of something she never thought possible. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something beautiful. The alien royal stood at the edge of her world, looking out over the sprawling city beneath her. The distant sounds of the bustling streets reached her ears, but today they felt far away. She had always prided herself on her ability to control everything, to command not just her kingdom but her own heart. Yet now, standing on the precipice of everything she had known, she realized she was no longer the same person. The human had changed her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. He had come into her life like a sudden storm, sweeping away the walls she had spent so many years building. His presence had cracked her armor, revealing a softness she had buried deep inside, something she had denied herself for too long. She had never allowed herself to care for anyone after all. A ruler couldn't afford such weakness. But in his gaze, she saw something different. He didn't need her to be perfect, to be invincible. He just needed her to be real. She took a deep breath and turned away from the window, her mind filled with the quiet certainty of what she needed to do. The palace had always been her world, her domain, but it now felt empty, a place that no longer held the same meaning. She had spent so many years fighting against her own feelings, denying her heart in the name of duty. But now, she couldn't ignore it any longer. With each step she took through the palace corridors, her heart beat faster, and yet, there was no fear. There was only resolve. The choices she had made in the past had all been about power, about control. But now, she was choosing something else. She was choosing to follow her heart. When she reached the courtyard, she found him standing there, as if he had been waiting for her. His expression was calm, steady, as always, but today, there was something in his eyes, something that mirrored the resolve she felt inside herself. He didn't say anything at first. There was no need for words. He simply reached out, his hand gentle against her own. And in that moment, the alien royal understood. She had spent so long searching for strength in the wrong places, thinking that power was everything. But true strength, she realized, wasn't in control or fear, it was in vulnerability. In the willingness to open oneself up to another, she looked at him, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with more certainty than she had ever felt. "I'm not alone anymore, and neither are you." His smile was soft, understanding. "We don't have to be." In that quiet exchange, the alien royal felt something shift within her, a shift that would forever change the path ahead. There were no guarantees, no promises of what the future would hold. But for the first time, she was willing to walk into the unknown, hand in hand with him. And